Hello there. Today I'm going to take you down the rabbit hole and go into some principles that are both applicable to each science and mysticism both. I'll be going into some channeling exercises, and I will be going into a whole host of different techniques. So without further ado, let me begin. When you're channeling energy, you may notice that sometimes it's really effective and sometimes it's not at all that effective, depending on the person you're doing it with, or and this is not an anomaly. In fact, to get past this, you must understand that half of everything we see with our eyes, at least, is a false backing. Take like a drawer back in the olden days, and you put a little false backing. So you open it up, you think that's the end of it, but there's a little treasure hidden in the secret compartment behind. Now what I'm calling a false backing is, in Tesla mathematics, the sixes are the false backing, because you can fit 2 3s in the place, or 2 spirits in the place of 1 6 matter. Now, I would like you to refer to the image on the screen. This is one brought to us by the generous and abundant contributions of Walter Russell. And if you look at the diagram, which is depicting the spinning of energy, creating kind of a cylindrical cone shape with a vortex surrounding it, well, both sides of that cone are actually spinning in the same direction. And picture from the vantage point, from the perspective of a 0 point. And the 0 point is looking at each of those directions from relative to itself. And to us, we're looking at it from an outside perspective. So it looks like 2 opposite directions of symmetrically the same thing. But from that 0 point at the very center, it creates a very different image. It's perfectly symmetrical. Clockwise and counterclockwise are actually the same direction from that 0 point, just in opposite directions. Now, when you're channeling energy, the shape you meld it into is of the utmost importance. However, the shape of the energy construct is only one important aspect. The other important aspect is where in the matrix you align it to. And the grid at which you should align it is not on 3 dimensions. It's on 4, 5, or higher dimensions. And you can picture it just like the vortexual cone that Walter Russell contributed in the last slide. You basically picture a cube with cones going into the center of the cube. And at the center of that cube is a 0 point. But from each cardinal direction, there will be a cone going into it. Walter Russell brought to light a lot of these interesting constructs. But when you put the flat end of the cone aligned perfectly with the center, that's a positive circuit. But when you put the points in the center, that's a negative circuit. Again, I'm not talking about good or bad here. I'm talking about the charge of energy. So refer to this next slide right here, and then you'll see a depiction, also by Walter Russell, of cones fitting inside cubes. Now think about the cones; they create the vortexual field between the matrix, much like the way fermions and bosons play out. The cones would be more like the bosons, and the cubic matrix would be more like the fermions. Bosons are force-carrying particles in particle physics, and fermions are basically, they occupy space in particle physics. And both are necessary. However, when you're channeling energy, the idea is to get the energy in the cones to converge into a 0 point and collapse and lock. It's like you take lines of force and you align them so that they collapse into a black hole at the very center of the lines of force. And this done in alignment with the right placement on the matrix will allow you to go and do some fantastical feats of energy work. But this knowledge has been largely lost up until this point. Now, to place the psychic construct in a place on the matrix, to determine the place where it would have the most effect, you need to render basically a conceptual image of this place we live in, planet Earth, as a plane. And in the plane, that it's spinning around the center, much like the flat Earth theory, but not the flat Earth theory. I'm talking about second quantization and fractalization of our reality. So you break the Earth up into a fractal disk that's constantly spinning, and also the cosmos, the stars, the heavens, into other fractal disks which are spinning, appearing just like in the first slide, to spin the opposite direction, but they're actually spinning the same direction from a 0 point. Now, why this is important is this allows you to then place psychic constructs in between the two disks, thus giving them traction, quantum traction, and leverage in that sense of the macro and microcosms. Now look at this slide. This is not exactly a depiction of what I'm talking about, but it contains what I'm talking about. If you look at the if you look at the way it's broken up into different vortexes of energy, and in the slide how they break it up not just in the vortexes of energy, but talk about the different layers involved. Imagine that whole thing as a fractal disk, two of which render the hologram of our reality. And once you realize the hologram of our reality, again, half of all the things we interact with are false backings because they lead only into material, and the ones lined with the 3 in the spirit are the ones we want. You can then start to manipulate your reality as such. But use this as an analogy for how to learn how to place these fractal disks. Now, in this next segment, basically when you're forming energy and you're shaping it into a psychic construct with the intent to cast a spell, you then have to make the energy diverse various layers. And this is done through a combination of pressure in the construct and also what I'll call temperature. But by temperature I mean basically heat or cold. Is the energy expanding or contracting in the way you develop your psychic construct? Now, one of the things that Walter Russell contributed was an understanding of the 4 zones of temperature, also correspondent to the 4 levels of reality in the Kabbalah, to which the Sefer Yetzirah contributes to just the very bottom layer, the material foundation. And a couple of those texts have actually been lost. Though technically, for being clever and insightful, the Sefer Yetzirah was based upon Genesis, and each of the other ones of those 4 texts are deeply encrypted within the first 4 books of Moses. So now look at this slide right here, and you will see that Walter Russell does an excellent job of explaining how in spherical symmetry, making and breaking, our reality is conceived. But when we're channeling energy, we start at the 4th pressure sphere, and we work our way in layers all the way to the 1st. You can see the mapping of the spherical symmetry of each in this depiction. However, we need to learn how to familiarize ourselves with the feeling, the essence of each of them. And then if you can get all of these aligned, as so, in the formation of your psychic construct, you can eventually learn to manipulate physical reality. This is just as it is. It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of practice to get to that point, in truth. Now, this quantum wave structure that forms our reality is seen most notably in this day and age in chemistry. The chemistry operates by the same wave particle function as does light, just on a different level of scale. So when we're channeling our energy and making these constructs, we are in fact using the same process as does chemistry use, on a different level of reality and a different level of scale. So when we look at, now there are going to be multiple slides in this segment. Look at the slide right here, and you'll see that all of our elements are on the periodic table are a waveform rotating a golden ratio spiral. But beyond that, all of the elements are each a different period, a standing period of light. And the matter is reinforced by the light. It goes to and from, back and forth in a gigantic cosmic cycle that goes down much smaller than even the Higgs boson, if we're being frank about the whole thing. Now, when you channel your energy construct, the different elements have different properties, but they're all in essence the same thing. The combination of pressure, temperature, vibrating at a certain threshold, different ranges between different atoms, different energies will interact with different things in various ways. We've mapped out chemistry, but we haven't yet mapped out, per se, at least the modern scientists haven't. The ancient mystics are already completed this one, but modern scientists have yet to map out the waveform, the standing period of wave that is our matter. And why is this important to casting constructs? Because if we understand we're doing the same thing on a different level of scale, and we're utilizing physics as our operator, at that point you might realize that what we're doing is actually ludicrously real, and what we're doing has the ability to reshape our reality, internal and external. Now, in all these depictions, there's a masculine and a feminine correspondence to each. And I'm not talking about sex here. I'm talking about the principles of the universe and making them handy. Now, as we'll look at these principles in unison, and we look at the toroidal vortex field, there is technology out there that will allow us to tap into this. And it operates off of the same symmetry, but on a different level, as our genetic code. In fact, of course, I'm talking about the ABHA coil, also known as the Rodin coil. And it creates a waveform of energy that goes to and fro, and literally the physical manifestation of that energy is DNA and RNA. It is a storage device of waveforms in a nutshell. Now, look at this slide where it shows the Rodin coil, and then its correspondence to DNA, but then at the same time, how it shows right and left hemispheres of the brain, how the I is the left brain, and the we is the right brain. And you just look at these, how they all interconnect. Of course, at the center of a Rodin coil would be a Merkaba vehicle. But I just thought I would put in a little bit of this because it relates. As we go deeper and deeper into the systematic mode of vibration, and more we understand of such things, the more we then become able to consciously manipulate it. And we have been using a fraction, a modicum of our potential brain power at this point. These next series of slides will depict, basically, in essence, our brain function, and we use terribly little of it. If you wonder why people are so stupid, it's not because they have to be, mind you. It's because they're using a very, very small proportion of their brain power. Now, here I'm going to relay some slides of our placement in the universe and go over them. So first of all, I'm going to put a slide up that depicts the quadrants, the quartering of our universe and the correspondences. This is again by Walter Russell. Now if you look at basically the male and female sides of the circuit, top left and bottom right female, top right and bottom left male, we're talking about again the energy charges and nothing to do with the gratuitousness of sex in this day and age in our culture. But if you look at it, has all these different elements, all the different forces, all put into a single spiral unit in this construct, in this image. Now let's move on to the next slide. So now you look at this one, and it's talking about the simplicity being softness, complexity being hardness, and again the polarities of energy. And you'll, of course, you probably notice the sacred geometry in this slide. So what Walter Russell is again depicting is different aspects of our reality and how they fit in a geometric, energetic form. Because all mathematics can be depicted as energy cycles. Next slide. Again, this is a depiction of Earth and the potential of basically what we can utilize. The vortex coil, the rodent coil, does this wonderfully in a nutshell. And then next slide, we go back to the double vortex in the two cones. And again, it says generation of mass and degeneration of mass as the two aspects of the slide. What they're talking about, these are both the two halves of what it takes to channel an energetic construct through the 0 point, and thus the casting of a spell. And lastly, I'm going to bring in there the cosmic pendulum, another contribution by Walter Russell. And this cosmic pendulum basically measures the energy flow going to and fro in the universe. All these principles in this video are applicable to everything in the universe. This is universal science based upon universal mathematics. But depending upon what the position on the pendulum is at the moment you cast the spell, also it's an environmental factor that also determines its effectiveness. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good day.